Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. Good morning, George.
Good morning.
That was a good morning for all the people that ever watch our content. There's only 7 of them. I don't know, I'm just kidding. How are you today? How you feeling? How you holding up, George?
Good. Keeping away from COVID, pretending everyone has it. I was very surprised yesterday to see my young and full of life students that I have on the Zoom session that I do for the ones in isolation looking very worse for wear. So that really kind of brought it home to me and realized that they weren't, couldn't really, well, they can't articulate themselves at the best of times, but they were having a hard time concentrating. So that's going to be happening all over the country. And yeah, that really kind of showed a reality to me, I guess.
Well, for people who don't know, if you didn't catch what did I rant for about 77 minutes yesterday? My 77-minute rant yesterday, something like that. I'm in isolation at the moment as well. A housemate who tested positive for COVID. Let's not get into that conversation again. But a housemate who tested positive for COVID. I hesitate to say this publicly because I do have a concern that it might come back and bite me in the ass. But I feel quite confident I'm not going to get COVID. And the reason is because we're following the science. Like, as soon as we thought the person, the housemate, likely was in contact with COVID, we treated them as if they had COVID, and we asked them to stay away from the house, and we started wearing masks in the house. Like I said yesterday, I've got these things all over the place. And to be honest, the really only contact I had with the housemate that could put me at risk was Saturday night. And so that's Sunday night, Monday night, Tuesday night. We're at like 3.5 days, still no one else in the house with symptoms. So I really hope, and look, if we get it, we get it. Or if I get it, I get it. And that's because it's a filthy little fucking virus. But I really hope I can, this is the thing I hesitate to say publicly in case it doesn't happen. But I really hope at the end of this isolation for a week, I can go to those people who are all anti the vaccine or hesitant or lukewarm to the vaccine. I feel confident in saying we didn't get it because we, again, followed the science. We followed the scientific advice. We followed the medical advice. Now, egg on my face if we get it. Well, not really, because it's not my fault because we still followed it. But I feel quite confident we're not going to come down with it, but we still have to follow these isolation rules. So we're in isolation right now. And it sounds like what you're saying is it's still rampant amongst university students. I saw yesterday, I think the numbers were 21,000, whereas there was a bit of a downward trend for the days before that. So yeah, is this BA2 kicking in, the second variant or not? But we're going to talk a little bit about COVID a bit later on, sort of in relation to how New Zealand is operating. Not quite an announcement yet, but a hinted an announcement of the borders opening. So we're going to be having a chat with the CEO of the New Zealand School of Tourism, who's going to talk to us about how important tourism is back. And it does, I mean, like I've said all the way through this for 2 years, they'll get to a point where we'll all go, okay, this is enough now, government. And it feels like when you've got 20,000 cases daily in the community and 14 at the border, it's time to open the borders. That feels a natural and normal and simple thing to say. But also later on this hour, we want to have a talk about how Tucker Carlson has or is apparently becoming a Russian asset. Now, by that, I don't even necessarily mean he is employed by and contracted to and advised by, but a lot of what he's putting out at the moment is being seen as in Russia as confirming their narrative for what's happening in Ukraine. So we're going to have a look at that in a bit of detail. Also, you know what? I could be honest with you, George. If nothing else, it gives me the opportunity to play that clip with Jon Stewart taking apart Tucker Carlson and his co-host on Crossfire from about 1997. If you haven't seen it before, if you hate everything we do, if you look at my face and think it's punchable, you do want to stick around to see the clip with Jon Stewart, because what he says to Tucker Carlson and his co-host 20 plus years ago, honestly, is 100% as accurate and relevant to Tucker Carlson today. And there are many people who think, although the head of CNN at the time didn't quite confirm this, that when Jon Stewart made the rant against these guys on Crossfire, that was the reason CNN took Crossfire off the air. So it's epic. It's an epic rant, and we'll look at it. And it means I don't have to rant for 77 minutes today, George. We can just let the actual professionals do it, like Jon Stewart. At the end of yesterday's show, we had breaking news, and the breaking news was that Simon Bridges is retiring from Parliament. Simon Bridges has been around for a long time. I think he's lived in Tauranga for over 20 years, he said today, which means he's probably been an MP for Tauranga for about that long. I have a lot of personal interactions with Simon Bridges. I don't know him personally, but when I was working on a radio station, a very young Simon Bridges and a very young Jacinda Ardern were my weekly correspondents for the left versus right. So one week it would be Jacinda, then it would be Simon, then it would be Jacinda. And I used to try and take credit when one was leader of the opposition and one was the prime minister, that it had something to do with their connection to me. It didn't, but it something to do. So I don't know these people personally. I don't know Simon personally, but I've had quite a lot to do with him. And I guess what we should start with, George, is maybe a little bit of a look at the announcement that Simon Bridges made yesterday, what he actually said, and what, if anything, it sort of means for the National Party and for, I guess, the politics of the next 18 months leading up to the next election. It was a very quick announcement. It looks like a 17-minute clip, but actually, to be honest, most of that is just him answering questions. His actual initial announcement was quite brief.
Well, kia ora koutou. Today, I'm announcing my intention to retire from Parliament sometime in the next days or weeks. And I'll be talking to the Speaker either today or tomorrow about formalising that. It's been a great privilege, and I've loved actually every minute of being a Member of Parliament, a local MP for Tauranga, being a junior through to a very senior Minister of the Crown, and leading the National Party and the opposition for a bit over 2 years. I've enjoyed the supposedly small things that haven't been small through to the big things. I've enjoyed helping couples with their surrogacy issues, with health issues, and getting people the treatment and the surgeries that they deserve as New Zealanders, helping New Zealanders to become citizens, and proudly so in this great country of ours. And through to, as a minister, being the first minister for space, being involved in the wine sector, and UFB, and roads, bridges, tunnels, CRL, many other things beside dams, hydro projects, battery storage schemes, hydrogen, all of those things. It's been a real privilege for me, and as I say, I have loved every minute of it. But it's time. And I feel that I'm leaving National at a good time for National. It's never perfect, but I think the reality is actually National has momentum, as we saw in the poll last week. It's got wind in its sails. And I feel very proud actually to have played a significant role in supporting that renewed momentum, and to be leaving National at this time, I think, is a good time for me and for the National Party. I love the National Party. I've been a member now, amazingly, actually, as a 45-year-old, 46th year, but this year for 30 years. And I believe Chris Luxon will make a great Prime Minister, and I'll be backing them all the way to do that. It's also, a chance for me to explore significant commercial opportunities, and maybe a media project or two. But first and foremost, I am husband to Natalie, and a dad to Emlyn, Harry, and Jemima. And this week, Emlyn and Harry turned 10 and 8 on Wednesday and Friday. And in a sense, they've only ever known a dad that goes on Monday or Tuesday and isn't back till the end of the week. And I'm prioritising them and really looking forward to spending more time with them. At age 45, look, my best years. And so I'm excited about that. I'm excited about the future. I'll miss my National Party whānau, but that's the way things go. So that's enough from me. And really,
I have to say, when I watched it the first time, I felt a lot shorter than that. I think that was a bit longer than I thought it was going to be. But there you go. So citing sort of personal reasons, citing young family, fair enough, citing business opportunities, and generally citing a media opportunity as well.
Yeah,
I don't know whether that was him saying I've got something lined up, or hey media, I'd like to do something. What do you reckon?
well, a bit of both. Yeah, he's cashing out, right? I feel like he's either going to do the old National Party revolving door with Air New Zealand and somehow end up on the board of Air New Zealand,
Yeah, right.
alongside some of his other mates, or something in the media. It sounds like I hadn't heard that. It's not surprising considering who we're going to talk about in a second, Nicola Willis herself being a qualified journalist, and considering the sort of, even in supposed democracies, we have this sort of firewall between media and media and politicians. They are often quite close, aren't they? And have that sort of revolving door commercial relationship. So I would not be surprised if he was suddenly on our airwaves as some sort of commentator. Or something like this. Yeah.
Also, there's a comment there from Simon. If you want to comment, especially if you're watching on YouTube, is the easiest way to do it. I think Simon Bridges would pay for the by-election. So he was asked in this, we're obviously not going to play all the press conference, but in the press conference that you can see pictures for right now, he was asked, why are you leaving now? Why are you causing a by-election? Why aren't you just at least sticking around to the end of the election? I mean, there's two things. The cynical side of me probably says he's talking kind of hypothetically about business opportunities. One could be he's got one lined up and it starts in a month. So he's got to go. But the reason he gave, and I'm actually not challenging this, I'm just saying there are other possibilities. So I'm not saying he's not telling the truth, but the reason he gave is he is a senior member. He obviously is an important figure. He didn't put it this way, but he's obviously an important figure. All senior members are leading up to an election. Better for him to go now. I mean, someone can be put in his portfolios, and the primary, I guess, most important one is finance, but also then the leader can shore up a front bench for an 18-month run at election, as opposed to having someone on the front bench holding a seat that's not going to be there after the election. So that was the answer to those questions. I think, did I even read that out, what Simon said? I can't remember if I did, but Simon says that the by-election should be paid for by Bridges. So that's what we were told yesterday by Simon Bridges. And
the other possibility is that the media's first question is right, and that there is a scandal, and that in a few, during the election, we're going to see back all these recordings of Luxon saying, absolutely not, there's no scandal. Crazier things have happened in politics, right? And it just totally would not surprise me at all.
Yeah, for sure. It's a complete possibility. And I guess from working in and around a lot of media organizations over the past, since the mid-90s or late 90s for me, that gets around. I haven't heard any of that. And although I'm one step removed, it still seems to go around those sorts of things. Like the typical thing in the past was, if it was something in the Labour Party, Whale Oil would release it. If it was something in National, I was just trying to think of Nikki Hager, those kind of guys would release something. So you could be right. I don't know, man. I mean, part of me kind of goes, political life seems interesting. I've always thought about being a politician, but to be honest, the hours and the travel and the away from your family, I just don't know if it's worth it. Even for the money they get, I don't know if it's worth it. I really don't.
Well, yeah. No, even for the money they get, it's not worth it for Simon Bridges, because he's going somewhere to get more money.
Even look at Jacinda Ardern. I mean, Jacinda Ardern, I wouldn't, it's a silly thing to say, but I wouldn't have her life and profile for anything in the world. I mean, I remember talking to Helen Clark. I used to have Helen Clark on a radio show fairly regularly when she was Prime Minister, because my radio station was pretty much in her electorate. And maybe we'd have her once every 3 months. And I remember her telling us about her schedule. And it was like 6 a.m. start, 11 p.m. finish, 7 days a week. There is no financial amount you could pay me to make that worthwhile for 9 years of work, even if after that you're going to make $1 squillion. There's just not. There's just and then the flip side of that, like we talked about yesterday, then there's zero gratitude at the end of all that work, all the way through. You know what I mean? It's a thankless job, and I guess that's why that old saying that the best qualification to be a politician is not wanting to be a politician. The people who actually want to be a politician, you got to ask why. Why do you want to get into that world? Shall we have a look at Leader Luxon? Are we able to call him that? Leader Luxon? Yes, we can. So after the announcement was made, Chris Luxon was on television this morning on the AM show, our favorite show in the world. And he was asked the question, why, did you try and keep him? Why was he leaving? What was that all about? And this is what he had to say.
Yeah, look, I mean, Simon's one of my good friends. We've known each other before I even came to politics. And so, he's going to be a big loss and we're going to miss him tremendously. But, I understand his reasons for going. He's done 14 years in this place. It's pretty full on. He's a young guy. He's still 45. He wants to have another career in the commercial world. For what it's worth, I think he's going to be absolutely outstanding at it. So, yeah, he's a big loss for us. And but I fully understand. I just wish him well because he's been such a good, like when you think about his record, right, he's been a great champion of Tauranga for 14 years. He's been a really good senior minister in the John Key, Bill English government. He's been a leader of this party and he's been a really effective finance opposition spokesperson as well. So, yeah, no, top guy, really talented guy. He's going to do really well. It's sad to be losing him, but he's really just a good guy. And we wish him really all the very best.
It is interesting to hear about what you're talking about. So you're going to go, George, about what happens to National Party MPs. They go on to Air New Zealand or whatever. Kind of echoes that conversation we had yesterday about the difference between the left and the right. The difference between the left and the right is after, you've had a senior position in National, you go on to be on the board of Air New Zealand. After you've had a senior position in Labour, you go and work for an NGO. Isn't that weird? I mean, like you work for the United Nations or you work for areas outside of business. I'm not saying anything to do with it's less money or anything, but
or you become a journalist.
Or you become a journalist. Yeah. Oh, that focus seems to be also slightly different as to where you end up.
Yeah. I mean, they continue hanging out with the same psychos, making pretty much the same money. I think they end up in similar spaces. I can imagine that there's newsrooms that are similar to Air New Zealand offices in terms of the ratio of all right people to absolute psychos.
Yeah, let's have a look at a couple of quick announcements that were made this morning. This came out before 11 a.m. in local time. It's coming up 11:20 right now. Is she the co-leader or the deputy leader? National MP Nicola Willis named as the finance spokesperson after Simon Bridges announced his retirement. I don't use this term disrespectfully because, to be honest, it's more of a kind of a conversation around is she controversial at all? But she's kind of a wallpaper, she's sort of background wallpaper. She doesn't seem to have had too many controversies or have too many skeletons in the closet. The only thing that really did come up was there was an accusation made by Green Party MP Martin Davison about a year ago of racist and classist statements made by Nicola Willis. Again, storm in a teacup, don't know, but that's about the only thing of note that seems to be controversial about her.
Is she accusing New Zealanders who raised concerns about their safety in relation to increased numbers of people in emergency accommodation as being racist?
Mr. Speaker, I am accusing a national member of this House of attempting to stigmatise a group of people with little access to power and resourcing, of attempting to whip up stigmatising and dehumanising narratives around groups of people who need our support, around groups of people who need us to address the systemic causes of crime. Yes, I am accusing a national member of raising that dehumanising narrative.
So there you go. I mean, whether that was, and there's a round of applause by a lot of people. You can see we didn't play that. Yeah. So there is some controversy around her, but it doesn't. I don't know if it's the kind of controversy that'll.
That's more just a video of Marilyn Davidson being awesome.
And before we jump into our next topic, do you have a couple of videos or a couple of commentaries to throw into the end of this conversation?
Yeah, I found this one interesting. Let me just share it. I found this interesting. This was from the announcement today
Yeah.
that Willis will be finance spokesperson. And, you know, I found this interesting in her mentioning of the younger generation.
We believe that at a time when it's not just fuel prices going up, it's the groceries, it's rent, it's the interest bill, New Zealanders need some relief, and we will continue to push for sensible tax reduction. In the medium term, I'm deeply concerned, Jason, that we are going to see a massive brain drain from New Zealand. And that's because when our borders open, I think we're going to have a lot of young New Zealanders who have given up hope. They're seeing costs run laps around their wage growth. They're seeing that the opportunity to buy a home is vastly diminished, and they're seeing that their skills are often well remunerated offshore. So we have a challenge to keep our talented people here in New Zealand.
It sounds to me like it sounds like a bit of a national meme, because what I want to know from here, if I was asking you the question, is what's the evidence for that concern? What's the evidence that we're going to have a brain drain because the world's reopening when everyone's running back to New Zealand at the moment? But I mean, it's not also saying that she's wrong. But what's the evidence for it? And when there doesn't appear to be any evidence, that's when you think this is just a meme. This is just a classic line to say, under Labor, everyone's going to leave, under us, they'll all stay. It's not true, because what I want to see is, how do you know that? What's the evidence behind it? Or is this just you talking from your gut? And if you're just talking from your gut, that's not a very good way for a politician to set policy.
No, it's a good way for them to campaign, right? And I think we're going to see this. We're going to see this heavily. Not only from the National Party, but from their friends in the media, the AM show, for example. We're going to see this going forth. The really ramping up the constant daily coverage of the cost of living under Jacinda and that sort of thing.
And as we pointed out yesterday, very clearly, under the new Labor plan, those who are most in need are going to get more money than under the national tax cuts plan. So really, we come down to a country where are the top earners prepared to pay a smidge more and the bottoms be looked after, or do the top earners want all their money back, or more, $8 a week of their money back, and end up affecting the bottom more as well? So we're going to get into another conversation now about the AM show and about COVID as well. Actually, it's not about the AM show. We're going to get into a conversation about COVID. In fact, the reason we mentioned the AM show a couple of times there is that Ryan Bridge, who we talked about yesterday, came on today and ended up having a revelation, or a reveal, that he has tested positive for COVID.
To be honest, I feel fine. I don't really feel like I have any symptoms at all,
which is great.
I've had worse hangovers, if I'm being completely honest with you. But the rules are you got to stay home and you got to isolate. So that's what I'm doing. But yeah, no, I feel fine. The only thing I've noticed is my voice, and you may be able to tell this, sounds like it's half an octave off what it would normally be. But apart from that, I'm feeling absolutely A-okay. And
that's called morning voice. I don't know if you've experienced morning voice, George, but when we was working in radio, morning voice was where your voice is just slightly deeper. And so all those morning radio jocks all sound a little bit more like this, and it's because you have morning voice. But also, speaking of COVID, speaking of what's going on, just out again this morning, I said 6 minutes ago, but that's because I had it up since before 11. COVID-19 response minister, Chris Hipkins, has tested positive for coronavirus. So it's around, it's still rampant. We've heard, George, your experiences of all your students being down with it. I'm currently isolating because a housemate has it. So let's not get this twisted, people, and still understand that it's still out there. And yes, the reason that I've been so ardently against sort of catching it is I acknowledge that for most people, I mean, Chris Luxon looks like he hasn't suffered going through it at all. Almost he's continued doing interviews and stuff. But for most people, it's probably going to be okay. For a section of people, it's going to be like a terrible cold or flu. And for a few people, it's going to be lifelong, serious, potentially dead, But and I think I said this yesterday, even if it was a serious flu type symptoms, and it's not the serious flu, but if those were the symptoms, I don't even want that. So that's why I've been avoiding it at all costs. But I guess just saying these sorts of things is just echoing again that it's still around. Now, tied into COVID, we talked a bit about this morning the idea of opening up the borders. And it seems logical to me that if we've got 14 cases at the border And I'm saying that because I did read that one day. I'm not sure what it was yesterday or what exactly it is, but I did read it one day. There was 14 cases at the border in the last week, and we're getting 20,000 cases in the community. It means that actually it's more dangerous for an Australian to come to New Zealand than for us to have an Australian in New Zealand. So it seems that this would be the appropriate time to open up the borders. And whilst technically the Prime Minister didn't give anything away yesterday, she was asked about the idea of opening up the borders, and this is what she said.
Just on the border reopening, is there any certainty you can give the tourist operators who have been hurting so hard for the 2 years? Is it likely Easter that they can be preparing to have people come back into their business?
I can tell them that the dates will be moving forward and that we'll be making those announcements on Wednesday. So within 48 hours, we'll be able to give that clarity to those operators around what the future of the border reopening looks like.
And is it likely that we would see what we've seen before, with Australia go first and the rest of the world to follow?
Yeah, we have taken into account a range of options, and we've taken into account those peak times for our tourism operators. We've tried to be really pragmatic about the decisions. But look, we'll be making those announcements in less now than 48 hours.
In fact, those announcements are going to be made today. So I guess we'll probably talk about this again tomorrow. But we thought if we are going to talk about opening the borders, I don't know if it's been leaked or it's been suggested. I'm not sure exactly what the correct terminology would be, George. But it's been suggested that the borders are going to reopen in April. That came out pretty much within about half an hour of the announcement yesterday. I'm not sure of the source of that. I guess we'll find out today 100% if that's confirmed. But as we've said, if there's 20,000 cases in the community, you're more at risk of coming to New Zealand now and catching COVID than bringing COVID in. And if you're fully vaccinated and you're protecting yourself, I don't know, maybe they have to do something with insurances and health insurance, George, in case someone gets it here and has to be hospitalized. But it seems that this is the time to open up the borders. Now, speaking of how important tourism is and how we need, I'll say or not need, but I think we also know need is the right answer to open our borders. We wanted to bring on an expert who can actually talk to us about it. He's from the New Zealand School of Tourism. He is the CEO. It's Ben Potter. And Ben, thank you for joining us on BHN this morning.
Thank you for having me.
No drama. Yeah. I bet for you guys. So New Zealand School of Tourism, let's just bring up your website so people can locate you. There we go. New Zealand School of Tourism. You are the CEO of it. I mean, obviously your life, your world, your conversations is going to heavily be around tourism, obviously teaching it to students, but having knowledge of it. Tell us what it's like today to understand for tourism operators primarily, the borders opening up. What does it mean for New Zealand?
Well, I think it just means that you can hopefully plan ahead in what the year might bring you, right? For us, in terms of training people, the jobs that were there pre-COVID, no longer there at the moment due to the international borders being closed to people not traveling. It just allows people a bit of hope, I guess, moving forward that things will get back to almost normal. And the industry itself is such a vibrant industry that's suffered greatly over the last two and a half years. That it'll take a little while, I think, for it to recover fully. But the first step is allowing international tourists back into the country.
Do you think that there's any issues? There are going to be problems because there's logistical issues. What are the problems facing New Zealand and facing tourism operators with reopening the borders? And like, I guess I'll preface it by asking you about, for example, are we going to be short of staff to operate the bungee jumping cords in Queenstown? Are there going to be any issues that have to be sorted out as well?
I think there are going to be issues depending on the business. Some businesses were able to keep more of their staff than others, but there's been a big shift of people out of the industry. So whether those people will come back, a lot of them will, because it's a really cool industry to be involved in. If you're passionate about people, you're passionate about travel, you want to do something different every day, then it's a really cool industry to be in. But there's going to be a lag because some people who were in the industry have moved on to other jobs and may not want to take what they may still perceive as a risk of going back into the industry after having secured something that's steady. So there's going to be a lag, but I think that'll also tie into a lag of international tourists coming into the country. I don't think come April the
Right.
12th, suddenly all the Australians who used to come to New Zealand will start coming in straight away. It'll take a bit of time, which will allow the industry to recover and to give businesses the opportunity to ramp back up in terms of scale. Unfortunately, we have lost some businesses that won't return. But that just means that there's opportunities for probably new players to come into the market once more international tourists are allowed to come into the country.
Ben, I'm in education myself. I'm wondering how has teaching tourism changed in the last couple of years with COVID?
It's been a tough sell, right? The bad news, people talking about tourism and then people wanting to study tourism, they get questioned probably more so than anything else around, well, why would you want to study for a job in an industry that pretty much no longer exists, right?
It doesn't exist, yeah.
So it's been a tough 2 years. What we've been able to do, though, is we've been able to try and teach people that, now was probably the best time to study so that when it reopens, you're in a great opportunity to take the skills, the qualifications that you have and to move. We already saw that with our students already going offshore because offshore's already opened and the US and stuff. So we sent like 40 odd students to Broadmoor Resort in Colorado at the end of 2021. They're over there for 12 months doing job placements. So, the rest of the world was starting to open, but it's been really tough the last 2 years trying to work against a narrative where it's all doom and gloom, and rightly so, because, businesses have gone under, jobs have not been there, people have moved out. So, it's been tough over the last 2 years to get people into training for an industry that they see as like, oh my God, what's going to happen? I think the reopening of the borders, international tourists, tourism happening again, people from New Zealand being able to go overseas, that's our main market. Our main market of students in the tourism brand is people who want to travel, who want to be in that fun environment space. For 2 years, they haven't been able to do that. Now they've started to be able to do that. So it's bringing more interest in, actually, I want to go, but I want to go with a qual first. So therefore, I already know about the industry. I can get into it. And then I can bring those skills back to New Zealand. So, it's been tough 2 years.
Let me put it out there as well. One of the things I love about doing this as a live show, Ben, is that when things happen, we can announce them in our hour. Like, Simon Bridges announced his retirement at about 11:45 yesterday, and we were able to end the show with that, and we followed up today. You mentioned April 12th, and I thought, that's interesting. And that's because since we've been talking about this conversation, we started talking about it about 12 minutes ago, the Prime Minister announced, like, whilst we're talking about the border reopening, it's been announced that it is actually April 12th. So that has been announced 11:28, and you and I started talking at about 11:26. So there you go. This is literally hot off the press, fast, hard-breaking. The government will open New Zealand borders to tourists and others from Australia without residence visas on April 12th. It says stuff understands, but I mean, I think we can all take that as said. With you working a school in tourism, I realize it's, as you were saying it, I was thinking it, why would you go and, I mean, like, I'm not going to go and train in how to write and teach Greek anymore because it's or ancient Greek, because it's not something that exists. My mum used to talk about the Iceman coming to her house and dropping off a load of ice to keep their refrigerator cool. I mean, I'm not going to get a job learning how to be an Iceman. I'm not going to get a job learning how to develop film anymore for cameras because it doesn't exist. So I get it as you're talking about these kids training for tourism in an industry that doesn't exist. But I'm wondering as well, will you now see an influx of students, or have you had a lot of students that you've been able to go, look, guys, we know that the industry is struggling at the moment. However, if you're trained up, as soon as it reopens, man, you're first off the rank. So have your numbers been steady, or do you also, much like the country, expect an influx right now?
We do expect enrollments to increase. It's the positive news stories about tourism just encourages sometimes not the person who wants to train, but their influencer who is probably in their ear going, why do you want to do that? There's no jobs there. There's no, stuff like that. Whereas Whereas that sort of argument becomes less now because there are jobs there. The world is opening up. We can prove it with students. The students who have stuck with us over the last 2 years are really well placed to take advantage of the opportunities that are going to be coming over the next few months. We've already seen that with industries reaching out before this announcement to say, hey, we're going to gear up this year. We feel like we've come over the top of the big COVID hump, touch wood. So, the positive stuff from industry was starting. We were able to have those conversations with students. But I do think this announcement, other positive news, when we start seeing international tourists from other parts of the country come into New Zealand, not other parts of the country, other parts of the world, I should say, other than Australia, then yeah, there'll be a definite want again for those people who are really passionate about travel, want to get into that industry, who have probably been put off in the last 2 years to actually go, yeah, now's the right time for me to follow my passion.
Yeah, and actually, it would be a really good time to get into training for tourism. It would be a really good time to come to New Zealand School of Tourism. Not that you're a sponsor of the show. I mean, you could be if you want to be, but
thanks.
But I'm saying because the people, I figure the people who have been training up the last 2 years are going to be first cab off the ranks, and then once tourism hits its normal things, there's going to be a need for people within New Zealand to work in the tourism sector. So it's like it almost feels like it's a new sector again. It's like for a while getting into crypto was a very important thing because it was new, and it feels like now would be a good time to get into tourism, and somewhere like you guys at New Zealand School of Tourism would be a great place to come and try people's wares, so to speak.
Well, we think so.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're right, 100%. Now's the time to get that. I mean, like Ad says, to get your ticket to the world, because that's what learning about tourism actually gives you.
And I guess the ticket to the world
starting to open.
Yeah, and the world's ticket now is about to have their ticket to New Zealand.
Yeah,
so that's
exactly.
That's a good thing as well.
That's a cool thing.
Hey, thanks so much for joining us today. I really appreciate your time, and I know just jumping in and being involved in a live stream show. CEO of New Zealand School of Tourism is Ben Potter. Ben, thanks for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot. Cheers, guys. Bye.
Thanks.
It's going to be interesting, actually. Yeah, because it does feel like a new market. It feels like it's a reopened market. It's a new market, and there will be many, many gaps in that job field. So
it was interesting what he was saying about he's often having to communicate with the person who's influencing the student.
Yeah. So mum and dad.
As someone in the humanities, this is something I encounter a lot, right? Is this idea that, a BA is going to get you nothing, right?
I remember growing up, we called a BA a bugger all.
Yeah.
That's about all that got you ready for.
When in reality, a BA can get you anything. I mean, it's about just being a person and learning how to do something. It's not about getting a job, right? It's not a specific. It's not a specialization, right? It's an education.
Yeah. Look, I've got a mate who currently runs a trust, and the trust makes radio content. Right, that's the job of this trust, and it's not a radio station, but it's like producers of radio content, and it supplies it to all the radio stations around New Zealand. So they're like a production house sort of thing. He studied, I'm pretty sure, German at university. He did a double degree, and it was something like German and geography or something like that. It was definitely German, but it had nothing to do with what he was doing. And I remember talking to him about this years ago, and he said what his study enabled him to do is teach him how to find answers, to teach him how to research, to teach him how to write, and they're all the skills that are the most important thing in his job. And he's been in that job for 20, 25 years, I guess. So, look, I'm not saying just go to university so you can get to write a good essay, but it's not just always what the qualification is about. And I've got qualifications in education. That's my background, and drama. And yes, I'm a drama queen, but what I do now, what I did for 20 plus years in the radio industry, had nothing to do with my qualifications, but they were a part of my growth to get to where I wanted to go.
And you had everything to do with them.
Yeah, completely. Hey, should we talk about my favorite topic of the day now?
Okay.
And we are talking about Tucker Carlson being a an asset of Russia. We've already got people who are jumping on this from earlier this hour, and sorry we haven't used your messages yet, but we thought we'd save them until we were talking about the issue. Simon says Tucker Carlson is a useful idiot. We've got Aussie a quarter, g'day mate, saying Rupert Murdoch is somehow not under intense scrutiny when ultimately he is the puppet master of all the Fox and Sky propaganda in every country he owns media. I kind of see two sides of that, because it's like Fox hosts will say, we've never been told to say anything, but there's an obvious hireage campaign or technique where they hire hosts who they know are going to say something. So in other words, they don't have to tell Tucker Carlson or any of the blooming white men on that program to let's send this narrative. They just hire people who they know that narrative is going to fit in with, so they don't actually have to instruct them. So then they can legitimately claim we've never been instructed.
And they're from an ideological background, a class background that fits in with that message that Murdoch wants to send out, or whatever the case may be.
I do wonder as well, though, when you own so many places, if you are someone who owns a big media agency, I don't mean how responsible are you ultimately, because there's always the ultimate buck stopper, but if you got involved in conversations around how everything was going to play out, that's all you'd ever do. So I'm not giving Rupert Murdoch a pass, but I'm saying from a media agency's point of view, I mean, I've worked for the biggest media companies in the country. I can't imagine the CEO, and that's just the CEO, not the owner who owns 12 other ones, being able to control everything that goes out on those airwaves. I know that from the number of times I got pulled into my manager's office. So, but but there is certainly a narrative which could be more directed by more senior management if they chose to. This is from Ben. Hi, Ben. Ben says Carlson does not have the same opinion as me. Therefore, Russia is controlling him.
I like this one. Live from my mum's house because it has free Wi-Fi. My mum doesn't have a house, but that's beside the point. I like this one because it does sort of get to what I wanted to bring up probably after we start talking about, after Pat's talked about Carlson
let's also be clear. Ben saying that we're criticizing Carlson because we don't agree with him. So we're criticizing Carlson. We'll fucking show you why we're criticizing Carlson when you can see his pro Kremlin line and his pro Russia agenda. We'll show you. So forget what we're saying. Like, you can turn the volume off right now, Ben, and push mute. And as soon as the videos come up, put them back on again, and that'll show you why we're criticizing Tucker Carlson. Is that fair, George?
Yeah. I also don't think Russia is controlling Carlson.
No, I haven't said that.
Yeah.
We haven't said that. We just said it. And also, Crazy Old World said Tucker wants to be president in 2028. A lot of people have put that out there that he wants to be a president at some stage in the future. But anyway, so let's not start with your and my opinion, George, because we're a couple of liberal lefties from the bottom of the South Island who may have a lot of more issues with Tucker Carlson and others. Let's start with someone who sits firmly and squarely on the right of politics in America. How about we start with that, shall we? A guy called Adam Kinzinger. He's a Republican. He's a politician, and he was asked to go on Tucker Carlson's show, and this was his response. This is not us. This is for Ben and others. It's not our response. This is a Republican's response in America.
For Carlson's show tonight, and there's no way I'll go on his show for a number of reasons. But first, let me state that his insistence that the West was provoking war with Putin, his spreading lies about biolabs, and his continued spewing of conspiracy theories are nothing but complete evil. His show is full of Russian propaganda and not news. And I will not validate his show by making an appearance. I do not want to be associated with it in any way. And we all know what would happen. And we all know what the goal is. We know the interview would be promoted to get more viewers, to make more money, to further empower his garbage. And let's talk tactics. When Tucker interviews someone in a hostile way, he interrupts and laughs when he's been caught in a lie. And after the segment's over, he brings on another guest to try to discredit any statement made by the prior guest without counter. He's not interested in conversations. He's only interested in himself. And at the end of the day, he'll continue to use his platform to deceive his all too trusting viewers and to further his own sense of power. The situation in Ukraine is serious and the outlook is dire. And this moment requires serious conversation and decisive action, not a self-serving showboat clamoring for more clicks tonight. So rather than validate his propaganda programming, I'm going to use my effort to support the Ukrainian people. So if you're interested in joining me, please consider donating to the Stand With Ukraine Fund. It's at countryfirst.com, country1st.com. And 100% of the money raised will go to humanitarian aid for those still in Ukraine and for those who've become refugees. Tucker has made it clear he stands with Putin and his war against freedom. I stand with Ukraine, democracy, and the men and women willing to fight and die for their country. Finally, Sophia and I want to offer our prayers for Benjamin Hall, a Fox News reporter injured in Ukraine. The job they do is dangerous and appreciated. This makes Tucker's position all the more disgusting.
Right, so that's Adam Kinzinger. Stop all this so we don't play again. There we go. Adam Kinzinger basically calling out Tucker Carlson. Now, one could argue, I mean, you could say if you wanted to, that maybe Adam Kinzinger has a bias himself, right? Maybe he has an agenda. Maybe because he's a Republican and he wants to stay away from the Trump line, maybe his constituents are more sort of anti-Trump, so he's taking that line, and he might have an issue around Carlson for other reasons. Okay, fine. So let's go one step further. Let's go to the Kremlin itself, and let's try and figure out what the Kremlin is saying about Tucker Carlson. Interestingly enough, there's been a memo that's been leaked from the Kremlin instructing Russian media to play as much Fox and in particular Tucker Carlson on their airwaves as possible. I'll read you a couple of paragraphs from this story. It says, quote, the Fox News primetime host Tucker Carlson has been widely accused of echoing Russian propaganda about the invasion of Ukraine, according to a report on Sunday. Earlier this month, the Putin regime in Moscow sent out an instruction to friendly media outlets to, quote, use more clips of Carlson. Later on in this article, it says, the memo included an instruction, quote, it is essential to use as much as possible fragments of broadcasts of the popular Fox News host Tucker Carlson, who sharply criticizes the actions of the United States and NATO, their negative role in unleashing the conflict in Ukraine, and the defiantly provocative behavior from leadership of the Eastern countries and NATO towards the Russian Federation and towards President Putin personally. So, I know you probably want to jump on this, George, but I'm going to do one more thing. You might argue, oh, well, you know, someone's saying that someone said. Someone's claiming it was probably fake news. It probably wasn't. So let's do one more thing. Let's go to Tucker Carlson's clips himself. Yeah? Let's go to see what Tucker Carlson has said about it. So this is not what another Republican representative has said. This is not what a reporter said the Kremlin said. This is what Tucker Carlson has said over the Ukraine and Russia. This is what Tucker thinks. So this is his mouth. He has this in an auto cue. He has written this. He is reading this. These are pre-prepared statements about the Ukraine and Russia. You tell me after watching this, is he putting forward a pro-Kremlin, pro-Russia line or not?
But is there another reason we should side with Ukraine over Russia? Russia is a much more significant country by every measure. Why is it disloyal to side with Russia, but loyal to side with Ukraine? They're both foreign countries that don't care anything.
Let's just answer that as well. Why is it disloyal? Well, one of the countries is a democracy and an independent country. One of the countries is an autocracy run by a dictator. One of the countries invaded the other country, a sovereign land. So there are numerous reasons why we should support Ukraine over Russia, just in case Tucker ever saw this and he needs that actually clarified for him.
Anything about the United States, China, which is the actual threat. Why would we take Ukraine's side? Why wouldn't we on Russia's side? I'm totally confused. So much. Has Putin ever called me a racist? Has he threatened to get me fired for disagreeing with him? Has he shipped every middle-class job in my town to Russia? I should say for the record, I'm totally opposed to these sanctions, and I don't think that we should be at war with Russia. And I think we should probably take the side of Russia if we have to choose between Russia and Ukraine. That is my view. But
well,
and I'm serious. Like, why do I
tell you why.
And why shouldn't I root for Russia, which I am?
And so now,
there you go. Why shouldn't I root for Russia, which I am? So for people who think, Carlson does not have the same opinion, therefore Russia is controlling him. I mean, like, no one said that Russia is controlling Tucker Carlson, but we are saying he is furthering a pro-Russian narrative. He's speaking out against Ukraine. And what's happening in Russia is they are using his words to further their narrative to their people. So he is actively a part of the propaganda cycle of this war in Russia. George.
Yeah, no, just some background. Adam Kinzinger he's like one of those never Trump Republicans, right? That somehow his congressional district allows him to be, have those positions like being anti-Trump or anti-Tucker Carlson. What I see is like some sort of hypocrisy, right? That, a Republican who relies on his constituency being, fed Fox News for over decades and conservative talkback radio finally finds something wrong with it, right? That they're supposedly pro-Russia and that sort of thing, where Tucker Carlson has basically, been spouting white nationalist talking points,
Sure.
especially when it came to the immigration crisis in America and Black Lives Matter for years and years, right? And so, I mean...
And the Kinzingers of this word were in support. Like, they never spoke out about that, but they're speaking out against it. I guess you also then have to ask, is this the straw? It's probably not. But,
not
go...
for people like Kinzinger, no. No, the line that they draw is when it comes to American empire and the interests of American foreign policy, right? That's the line that's crossing too far. The white nationalism at home is all right, but when it comes to American interests over abroad, then Tucker needs to go.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But look, I mean, the reason we want to echo this, and we're about to play a clip from, it's 2004, so it's the best part of 20 years ago, where Tucker Carlson was then on CNN and got dismantled by Jon Stewart. And one of the reasons I want to play it is because it's fucking amazing. But the second reason is you actually hear what Jon Stewart describes Tucker doing is exactly still what he's doing today. So we'll get to that in a second. But what I'm hoping, and I'm not confident of this, and I'm not, not trying to be Pollyanna here or anything, but is that at some stage people have to go enough. And I'm hoping that people, especially people in America, obviously really only people in America, can finally see that this host in particular, let alone all the other narratives on Fox News, is currently in support of Putin over a democracy. They spend 23 and a half of their hours screaming, we want to take democracy to the world, and we're the big boys of the world. We're going to take over the world and spread democracy. And then half an hour during Tucker Carlson talking about we want to support this autocracy and squash the democracy. I really hope that at some point there is cut through with this, and maybe it is the straw for some people to go, that's one step too far. Yes, you're right. Black Lives Matter should have been one step too far in the narrative on Fox. The white supremacy narrative on Fox should have been one step too far. But we all got to go, even if it means that, the person has to come and shoot your grandmother in the face, that becomes one step too far. There's got to be a line somewhere. And I just hope that this is the line for a good portion of people. Like it might not be. I'm not being naive about that, but I'm just hoping there could be. Simon also says Kinzinger is not standing for re-election. It's amazing how many of those Republicans get brave to speak out when they're not standing for re-election. Shall we get on to the part I've been looking forward to the whole show to play? Okay, so I mean, most of you know who Jon Stewart is. Jon Stewart is an icon for me because he was running his daily show through a segment of this century that I was starting to get into and most interested in American politics, through that kind of first decade and into the start of the second decade and he was phenomenal. He was a source of accurate news and information more so than anybody else. And one of the reasons he was when they set up the Daily Show, they set up as comedy first, news second, which means he did take pot shots at everybody. It didn't matter that he was liberal and from the left. They took pot shots at everybody. And so they always based it in comedy first. And when you based it in comedy first, as the jester did in medieval times to the king, you had the opportunity to speak truth to power because your main objective is to be funny, but when you're funny with truth, it's even more powerful. So your objective is not to further the narrative of a particular political party AM show, we're looking at you, or Fox News, we're looking at you, but it was to be funny first, and that means it gave the Daily Show under Jon Stewart the opportunity to be cutting and truthful and real, and actually better informed than 90% of the news viewers in America as well, the viewers of the Daily Show. So 2003, 2004, Jon Stewart very famously went on a show called Crossfire. Crossfire was set up to be a left versus right show. Tucker Carlson was one of the hosts as a 35-year-old. The other guy, I forget his name, but that's not the focus of this. And he's still on CNN now, I think. And he dismantled them. And this interview is said to be one of the reasons Crossfire got cancelled. And I'm just going to play you 3, 4, 5 minutes. I want you to hear the word, and you have to watch this. This has been watched tens of millions of times. I want you to hear the words that Jon Stewart is saying about Crossfire and about what Tucker Carlson and his co-host are doing, and think about what Tucker Carlson's doing today, and see if it echoes true to you. Have a listen.
Now, this is theater. I mean, it's obvious. How old are you?
35.
And you wear a bow tie.
Yeah, I do. I do.
So this is.
No, I know. Let me just go. No, come on.
And listen, I'm not suggesting that you're not a smart guy, because those are not easy to tie. But the thing is that you're doing theater when you should be doing debate, which would be great.
No, it's
not honest. What you do is not honest. What you do is partisan hackery. And I'll tell you why I know
Kerry
it.
on your show and you sniff his throne, and you're accusing us of partisan hackery?
Absolutely.
You've got to be kidding, man.
You're on CNN. The show that leads into me is puppets making crank phone calls. What is wrong with you?
Well, I'm just saying, there's no reason for you, when you have this marvelous opportunity not to be the guy's butt boy, to go ahead and be his butt boy.
Yes,
It's embarrassing.
I was absolutely his butt boy. I was so far. You would not believe what he ate 2 weeks ago. You know, the interesting thing that I have is you have a responsibility to the public discourse, and you fail miserably.
School, I think.
You need to go to one. The thing that I want to say is, when you have people on knee-jerk reactionary talk.
Wait, I thought you were going to be funny. Come on, be funny.
No, I'm not going to be your monkey. Go ahead. I watch your show every day, and it kills me.
I can tell you love it.
It's so painful to watch. You know, because we need what you do. This is such a great opportunity you have here to actually get politicians off of their marketing and strategy. Yeah, it's someone who watches your show and cannot take it anymore. I just can't.
What's it like to have dinner with you? It must be excruciating. Do you like lecture people like this? Or do you come over to their house and sit and lecture them? And, you know, they're not doing the right thing, that they're missing their opportunities, evading their responsibilities?
If I think they are.
Look, I wouldn't want to eat with you, man. That's horrible.
I know, and you won't. But the thing I want to get to.
We did promise naked pictures of the Supreme
Court. Yeah, we did. No. Let's get to those.
Why can't we just talk?
Book.
Please, I beg of you guys.
I think you watch too much Crossfire. We're going to take a quick break.
No. Look,
no, hold on.
Please.
We've got commercials.
Please.
Next,
please stop.
In the rapid fire.
Please
Hopefully
stop.
He'll be here. We hope. We think. And then, did you ask?
So, yeah, and people will look at that and think it's hilarious, and he's very, very funny. But what he said was so telling and so true, and the idea of theatre, disingenuous. You know, it's completely accurate to what's happening today. I wanted to play it because of us talking about Tucker, but it's that I guess that spreads to media in general. That went out live on CNN. I mean, that looks like something that they'd never broadcast, and that was scraped from a back room. Some employee brought out, but that went out live on CNN. This comedian decimating this show and telling the journalists there, if Tucker is a journalist or not, that they actually need to do better. And the reason they need to do better is for us. We need to have better of them. And we should expect more of our journalists and our political commentators and our people putting out information, because we need them to be. I've tried to get the Prime Minister since pre-2018. I got told at the start of, because I do a podcast as well, not just this. I do a podcast that's actually platformed on stuff.co.nz. So it's got some reach, you know. And I got told at the start of last year, 2019, that the Prime Minister was not available for the rest of the year for me. That is carte blanche said it. Now, I don't have a problem with that in general. She's the Prime Minister, you know, COVID, you know, White Island, you know, all sorts of problems going on. But we need people who do have access to these people, because we don't, to be able to actually ask the questions on our behalf and be genuine and actually look for answers and not do fucking theatre. That's what we need. George, you're a lecturer or a tutor in
Yeah,
journalism.
sorry.
So tell me what you're thinking.
Yeah, I mean, this is the idea of journalism, right? Is that it's a important part of a democracy, a component of democracy, where it informs the public so that they can then make the decision to vote in the politicians. But it seems to have gone totally out of hand, where everyone's in each other's pockets, and so you can no longer have a functioning democracy when there's not only like conflicts of interest and that sort of thing commercially, but as you say, this theatre, the spectacle, the society of the spectacle is the French theorists used to call it, right? That it's no longer a society of commodities and consumerism, but it's a society of, well, consuming spectacle online, right? And that this has become like a huge genre of content since, like, Jon Stewart was sort of ahead of the curve there in his comments there, which I'm guessing were in the early 2000s.
2004 that was.
Yeah, this has increased tenfold since then. This idea of theatre, of a debate between this is especially on American television. This is a huge component. This idea that, oh, if we just have the Democrat and the Republican on to debate, then that is somehow adding to American democracy. When it's just totally sort of stagnant in a way. It's totally always serving the powers that be, the people at top, at the top of the at the top of the food chain.
But it's also not just Democrat versus Republican. It's actually the issue at hand and what weight it has as well. So, for example, there shouldn't be any 50-50 debates going on online at the moment around COVID and vaccines. However you set it up, it should be very clear that it's a 95%, 5% debate. Whereas when people do get on, get back on your bed. When people do get on and give weight to something, 50% of the weight, it gives it 50% of the importance. So it's not just the theatrics of the people talking and saying and doing, it's the theatrics and the accuracy of how it's being presented and the weight that's being given to the stories as well. So it's a really important thing to do. And look, I guess this is a really silly thing to say because we're a little pissant group of people in the bottom of the South Island kind of doing this show, overtly acknowledging we're left-leaning and or further than that. But I'm always about honesty and upfrontness, and if it's on the left and it's warranting of criticism, I will criticize it. If it's on the right and it's warranted of criticism, I will criticize, and vice versa. If it's on the right and it's warranting of praise, I will praise it. And I think that's something that we're going to do and continue to do. And it's because I don't give a fuck about furthering a narrative. What I want to do is talk honestly and truthfully. Now, what we're doing though is an opinion-based thing. So sometimes my opinion may differ with, maybe I might be wrong, but what we won't do is put out a narrative to further a cause or further a political perspective. I may have a perspective that gets disproven or gets proven wrong. That's fine, but it'll never be done in a way that's going to be, we're not gonna. We're going to ignore that thing from that perspective because it doesn't suit our narrative. Never, ever going to do that. And whilst, there's not a lot of people picking up on what we're doing at the moment, there will be. And if you see this, that's the pledge. This is a lot of us making this, but I'm driving this. That's why I'm on every day. And that's the pledge I make publicly, that this is always going to be about the truth and the reality and all those bits and bobs as well. Yeah. Hey, let's just have a look what Lubo's asked us as well. We don't know if we've got an answer for all these questions, but Lubo says, can I point the huge differences between Sky News UK and Sky News Australia? Sky News UK looks well balanced news, while the Australian version is just a copy of Fox. Are the laws different in what way? I don't watch a lot of either Sky News UK or Sky News Australia, so I can't comment to their general narrative. But the way that any news agency gets around it is they talk about, well, this is opinion. It's opinion. It's opinion based. I mean, a lot of the shows that lean furthest left or right on any media outlet is because they just say it's our narrative. It's the narrative of. So that's what that's how they get around it. And you'll find, people like Brett Baer, and I forget the name of the other guy who's recently left Fox News. They often are. They may be conservative in their ideologies, but they do just do news. Whereas the ones that get all the publicity, like Tucker Carlson and Sean Hannity, are opinion hosts, and may not be journalists. I don't think Sean Hannity's a journalist. I could be wrong with that, but they just offer opinions, and that's the way any kind of any journalistic or news agency gets around having a narrative. They just have their opinion-based people, and then they further that by reporting it from an opinion host, and then the news section of that agency will say, some people are saying that was a criticism that Jon Stewart used to do all the time. So in the morning, they would offer opinions on their Fox shows in the morning, and then through the day, they'd report, some media outlets are reporting that, and what they're actually doing is reporting what their own opinion host said that morning of.
Yeah,
So that's what they do.
The difference between the UK and Australia, I think, comes down to a tradition of institutions and a sort of cultural tradition, where the UK it is a legal thing. Will be laws in place that hold British news to a much higher standard than in Australia when it comes to these channels. But yeah, also I think it's a cultural thing that the Australian opinion news is, as you're saying, a much newer phenomenon influenced by American Fox News, whereas in the UK there is a longer tradition of, the whole sort of BBC, this is the truth, right? This is facts,
Right, yeah.
and
Well, also though, it's interesting that opinion-based information so often leans right. And you look at and part of the reason for that is often there's a lot of outlets that tend to lean left, and there's only a few that lean right. So those few that get bigger and bigger, like the only one Fox News. But you think about what people call, and I'm just going to say what people call left leaning, and you think straight away of places like CNBC, MSN, CNN. There seems to be more of them. So therefore, Fox, the one that leans right, becomes a powerhouse because all the right wingers go to Fox, whereas all left wingers they spread amongst others. And I think I can tell you,
and those left-leaning ones are basically just establishment channels, right? That don't even really, they wouldn't have Bernie on as much during the campaign as, say, someone like Biden or Kamala, or they're very establishment Democrat.
And I speaking from experience, I mean, I used to work for News Talk ZB. It's a very right-wing station. I was probably one of the few that wasn't. I was the most complained about host on News Talk ZB. I got told that by my manager, and I did a mid-dawn show. So it goes to show how much if you offer a contrary opinion to the narrative of the station, how that didn't go off very well, because the listeners were used to being spoon-fed right-wing, and I won't say propaganda, but I'd say right-wing positions. So I'd come on and ask something different in a fucking mid-dawn show and get complaints because it upset people, or I'd ask people, why do you believe that? And it would upset them that they got even half challenged. But I was in my 30s and I was like, well, this is the time that Leighton Smith and Paul Holmes got their big shows, and I'm in my 30s now, and let's have a look around. And I spoke to who was then running the opposition talk show, which was called Radio Live at the time, and it was doing terribly against ZB. But she said to me, I'm not inferring, she was like, we believe conservative talk is at least the next 10 to 15 years of talk radio in New Zealand. And so they wouldn't go near me because they wanted to stay conservative talk. Now, they might not want to go near me because I was not good enough. Fine, fair. I'm not saying I deserved or warranted a position. But the point I'm making is it was spoken to me that this is part of Media Works, that their directive in that time was to do conservative talk. News Talk ZB did conservative talk. It's one of the things that's most interesting about what's going to happen with this new station with Media Works Today FM. I know a lot about what's going on behind the scenes there because people talk. And I know that one of the things they're actively trying to do is have representation of lots of aspects of society, trying to highlight the areas where we're more same than different. And I am fascinated to see if it's going to work. But I guess it also sounds a bit like RNZ. And I think if it's going to be a bit like RNZ, why would people listen to a new station, which is RNZ with ads, when there's already RNZ without ads? So, I mean, I'm not saying that like it's bad. I'm saying that like I'm fascinated to see, because if it works, it'll be amazing.
It sounds like it's going to be the corporate liberal channel, right? Whereas RNZ
but the person running it, Dallas Gurney, he was running News Talk ZB when I left. So you say
exactly, it's all the same people.
He is a brilliant and genius broadcast manager. I worked under him at Classic Hits as well. Absolutely wonderful. He had very interesting views and what to do and stuff. But you talk about liberal, a classic liberal. Well, I mean, he ran a conservative talk station for several years before I started. So I don't know where he sits politically, but it'll be interesting to see what happens. And I feel with him, you know how I was talking about Jon Stewart's primary focus was comedy first. I think for him, the guy running Today FM, his primary focus is good broadcasting first. I really think that's the truth. So I'm really interested to see what happens with it. You know, I know several people who are involved with it, and I wish them nothing but good luck, because any foray into the world of media in New Zealand that may break up the monopoly that ZB holds in the commercial world at the moment, and I guess you'd say duopoly between ZB and Radio New Zealand, between those sort of talk current events brands, is nothing but a good thing.
Yeah, I'm always cynical about all of it, whether we want to give it the left or the right label, especially when we're talking about these big media corporations. I think, as Crazy Old World says there, that that Fox and MSNBC or whatever the new Flash Kumbaya TV show channel or radio channel in New Zealand always will support the corporate narrative, as Crazy Old World says, and ignore the counter.
And that's so often, I've heard it spoken of numerous times from international media sources, that they don't talk about left versus right, they talk about corporate. Corporate is first. And actually, if you can make enough money supporting the left, then that's what your narrative becomes. If you can make enough money supporting the right, then that's what your narrative becomes. So when the dollar figure is at the top and the left right is at the bottom, it's the dollar figure thing that always is the one, which is why you see change at places like Fox when advertisers start to pull out. I mean, that's the thing that drives change, not the commentary that cause advertisers to pull out. It's the advertisers pulling out that causes the change. All right. Hey, we're over. We're over.
Tail is wagging the dog.
Yeah, we're over, but who gives a fuck? And I like talking about media, so that's us pretty much done. And Dustin, George, thank you for this morning. Just so people know, George is the producer, and he comes in backwards and forwards and helps and does some sort of hosting roles with us as well. But primarily, George does set up in the background. But thank you for filling in today, because we had someone booked up, but we're also suffering from people being unavailable because of COVID. So the co-host who was going to be on today hasn't got COVID, but had to go into work to his job where he gets paid, because others at his work are out with COVID. Tomorrow we expect to have Jeremy Elwood, comedian. And then on Friday, we're going to have Maktis Adamandi again, doctor from University of Canterbury, who offers amazing. I feel like on those shows, I can just sit back and go, so what do you think? And then I got this.
Yeah.
And just listen to Maktis. And so she'll be with us, I think, on Friday. That's what's planned at the moment. But be honest with you, this is day to day, because people are telling us every day, oh, I'm in isolation, I can't do it. Oh, I've got COVID. We were going to talk to someone about Three Waters this week, and I've just seen in the news that he's got COVID. So it's everywhere. We'll see what happens. Appreciate you joining us. Remember, the best way you can support us right now, other than a big fat check delivered to my PO box. No, I don't have a PO box. Is to share our shit. There'll be a couple of clips up today from what we've been talking about. Share it around. Follow us on the YouTube channel, which is scrolling across the bottom as we speak. That's the best place to find us. All the clips go there. Or you can also follow me on my Twitter. There's my Twitter as well. And if you follow me on my Twitter, all the clips go up there as well. Sometimes they're up there a bit late, like last night after 11 p.m. because I'm still dealing with isolation because of a housemate having COVID, and I had other things to do. Sometimes they're up within a couple of hours of the show finishing. So you follow me on Twitter, you'll see them. You follow us on YouTube and hit that bell notification, you'll see them. But other than that, George, unless there's anything else, I think we should fuck off for lunch.
Yeah.
We good?
Yeah.
All right, sir. Thank you, George. Really appreciate you jumping in again today. Thank you for watching, and share our shit and follow me on Twitter. And other than that, we will see you tomorrow morning at 11. At the moment, hopefully with Jeremy Elwood.